session for Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021. And please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have one major item on the agenda for tonight, which is street maintenance program, including update on special street maintenance fund and safe routes to school, which was as part of the .2 sales tax projects and plans, and a public work director.
All right, thank you, Mayor.
Take over.
Good evening, Commissioners. Rob Ott, Director of Public Works, City of Manhattan. And then also in the audience tonight, I have Jeff Davis, our Street Superintendent for Street Fleet and Stormwater, and then our Street Supervisor for Street Fleet and Stormwater as well, Dan Tyson. They're part of the city crews. And as the Mayor kind of opened up here this morning, tonight's intent is no major decisions I'm looking for tonight, certainly input as always. And if there's concerns, hopefully we can address them and adjust the program as we move forward. As the Mayor kind of briefly mentioned in the opening, in 2016, the community passed a sales tax initiative, and we began to actually collect that revenue in 2017, about midway through the year. And the overall program is based on three fundamental things in terms of trying to maintain our streets at a certain level. The sales tax, which passed, the gas tax, which we receive from the feds, and then our general fund, which pays for the salaries, pays for materials, and equipment for the crews. And what we've tried ever since 2016 is we tried to roughly produce $4 million in contractor valued repairs using the three different funds. And also just kind of remind commissioners of the sales tax revenue collected, and this is just the sales tax, not the gas tax or general fund. Part of that ballot question was that roughly 5% is to go towards safe routes to school, or roughly an estimated $100,000 a year, or the life of the bond, the life of the question is about $1 million. One thing that I do want to give you all a heads up is that at the end of 2021, it's our intent to produce a 5-year report. So at the end of this year will be 5 years of the sales tax ballot initiative, and we'll try and provide an update on how those funds have been spent, improvements have been made to the community, and again, the report is intended to provide some basis for decisions to come.
Is that money coming in faster or slower than predicted on the 0.2%? I know they tend to do conservative. You're going to get to that later?
I certainly can, Commissioner.
That's right. Just keep going then.
Okay. And so, the last time we asked this question was in 2016, which was a presidential election. And, my intent is at the end of this year, produce that report, and then hopefully have some discussions with you all about what do we do going forward as a community. So do we look at a 2024 ballot question? Obviously, this will run out, I believe, in 2027. And again, those are the types of things that will be coming back to you probably later this year. So with that,
Rob, I have just a...
Oh, sure, Commissioner.
No, just a short comment about the 5-year report.
Sure.
Would you make sure that that's broken, it's simple, broken down by year?
Oh,
So
absolutely.
we can actually, instead of just big numbers, if you would break it down so we can actually see the year to year, especially the totals of the two different categories, which, I don't know, maybe more than 3, but of course, asphalt and concrete and whatever else there is.
Sure.
Yeah, because I was trying to make the numbers add up here.
No, I understand.
Thank you.
No, absolutely. So these are some facts here, just to provide you kind of an overall snapshot. We updated our from 2020 construction, so there's a slight increase since the last year's report in 2019. Basically, we added in new subdivisions, any roads that were widened, any additional lanes that were added. So that all computes into the square yards in our community. The one thing that this 4.1 million square yards of pavement doesn't include the alleys. We don't keep pavement condition indexes on alleys, and perhaps someday we should. I kind of have it broken out a little bit in what our asphalt and concrete is, and then for our total value of our network. So in other words, if you were to snap your fingers and say, you know, I got to replace all 4.13 million square yards, which we wouldn't do, but what is the value of that asset? Well, it's roughly $387 million. That's the value of our asset or our street network that we're trying to maintain. And the analogy I often use is that, you know, similar to all of you that have your homes, you know, each year the sun fades, the wind, the rain, the cold deteriorates the paint on your house. You have X number of square feet of siding that has to be painted, and you want to maintain it at a certain level. Our streets are no different. We want to try and maintain our streets at a certain level, something that's acceptable. And my square yards to paint or fix just happens to be 4.13 million square yards. So that's the difference, but that's kind of the analogy is what we're trying to do. Just like your house, if you paint a little bit of your house each year, it's not too bad. You get it all the way around back to where you started maybe 3-4 years ago. You know, hopefully everything's in good shape and your average is up. The next map in the packet is very simple. It's a pavement condition index. Back in 2018, we asked a third party to evaluate our street network. And they looked at basically 3 different criteria: the type of distress, the density of that stress, and the severity of the stress on each of those segments. And then they came up with a rating for that segment. And this map here shows, you know, it's very simplistic. If it's kind of in the pink or the red color up there, it's below 70. If it's in the green, it's above 70. And ever since 2018, every time we go and make an improvement, we try and hopefully we're capturing all those various different improvements and mapping them correctly in terms of changing that pavement condition index from whatever it was up to 100 because now it's been repaired and restored. Just a quick breakdown in lane miles. The majority of our system is in our residential or local streets. We keep a simplistic functional class. I think you've heard the MPO Stephanie talk in the past. They actually have 7 different functional classes from the feds. For our purposes, we just kind of stick to the local, collector, and arterial. You know, even though the local streets are the largest quantity out there, just remember that the majority of our heavy traffic volumes or trips per day per lane mile are on our collector and arterial streets. This happens to be a breakdown by each classification of the network. So our local streets right now, we are above 70 in all 3 of the different classifications. You can kind of see the arterials are a little bit higher. And the collectors actually are just slightly below what the local streets are. Again, the majority of our traffic does travel on collectors and arterials, and you'll hear me talk about some of the collector streets here in a little bit towards the end of the presentation. The next map is a breakdown, and I don't know if Commissioner Morris, if this answers your question, but this is a breakdown by classification and then the quantity of concrete and asphalt in each classification. That's kind of this next slide here. I just typed out what the pavement condition index is for each surface type, and then again, what each surface type by classification is this chart. On to the next one. Now this one happens to be a breakdown in all the streets, broken out in, you know, other concrete and asphalt. So the orange is the concrete and the blue is the asphalt. The kind of the checkered pattern here and here happen to be the segments that are below the 70 PCI. Right now, we're relatively close. Asphalt has a little bit more square yards that is below 70 than the concrete. And we certainly have some intent to put out quite a bit of asphalt bids this year in terms of trying to address some of those square yards. But for the most part, we're fairly close considering the total of 4.1 million square yards.
Rob?
Yes.
This is Commissioner Reddy. Can you tell me when is asphalt used and when is concrete used? When you talk about collector, local, and arterial?
Sure. So what we do today, we typically get pavement recommendations from our consultants when we are going to do complete rehabs on, say, our arterials and collectors. The history on local streets, we used to dual bid, and we have some equivalent sections. In other words, 6 inches of concrete is equal to 8 inches of asphalt. When I first started here, we used to dual bid both of those for new subdivisions. And it's flip-flopped, which one was cheaper, which one came in more economically. When I first started here, asphalt at the time, oil prices, the construction methods, asphalt was cheaper for local streets. And then as time went on, concrete, because the markets changed, concrete became more economical than the asphalt. So that's a little bit of the history, at least on the local side. As far as new projects, we normally get recommendations, or my staff will make recommendations, looking at the traffic volumes, the soil types. They use a couple of different softwares to design that pavement type and thickness, and then come up with a recommendation. We traditionally try to go back with the same type of surface type. So for example, Kimball Avenue, a few years ago, I say a few years, 2 or 3 years ago, we was just west of the hospital, basically up to Seth Child Road. When we tore that thing all the way down to the base, we went back with asphalt. So, you know, we traditionally just try and replace whatever's been there with the similar or same surface type. Maybe a different cross section, maybe it's a little thicker, maybe the base is a little bit different, but that's what we've tried to do. So I don't know if that answers your question. That's a little bit of the history. There are differences in life cycle costs, and they can get a little political sometimes. But of course, the concrete folks will claim one thing, and the asphalt folks will claim another thing. I try not to get into that. I just try and maintain what's there with the surface type and go back with it. So, does that help answer your
I
question?
think so. So on Wreath, they're undoing a lot of that road. It looks like concrete.
Yep.
And on Kimball, when they redo some of those areas, it looks like asphalt. Is that about right? I guess
Yeah.
it matters on the type of vehicles and the, like you were saying, however many, and also the weight.
Yep.
Because I don't see like massive trucks going on Wreath nearly as much as they would
Yep.
on Kimball. And probably asphalt is more sustainable for that type of weight.
Yep.
Is that about right?
Either product can handle heavier loads. It just depends on the thickness of it, as well as what type of base you're putting underneath it. There are different life cycle costs for asphalt versus concrete. If you can get the full life out of concrete, asphalt has more, a lot of times you have to mill every 10 to 12 years. And there's advantages and disadvantages to that. Ride quality, you get a new surface, you mill down 2 or 3 inches and you get a new surface that's, the rideability is much better than maybe that concrete that's 15 years old. And then you can put new pavement markings. But there's a repetitive cost to that as well. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both.
Yeah, now you're the engineer, but I was also thinking about weather, and we've had a very mild weather winter, so I wasn't sure how all that plays out. as far as cost and wear and tear and the life cycle of each of these too, so.
Yep.
Yeah, longer story. Thank you.
No, absolutely. This next slide here, kind of, again, further breaks down. It kind of takes a couple of the past slides and breaks it down even further. You have local, collector, and arterial again, but then you have it broken down into the blue being concrete, the orange being asphalt, and then what is above and below 70% again. As you can see, and I kind of have talked about this previously, the need to make sure that we stay on top of our local streets, because it is the largest quantity that is out there. And we certainly want to continue to, while the majority of our traffic is on collectors and arterials, and definitely affects a lot of our commercial type traffic, those local streets, if we ignore them too much, there's so many square yards that'll drive down our overall average of the system. So again, that's just another breakdown of how to look at it. So what is the plans, I guess, a little bit for 2021? Crews have already started on some segments. For example, Leon Ridge and Miller Parkway intersection is already completed. The crews are already up, working in the Sunset Zoo area on Walnut Drive. Gary Avenue will probably be delayed a little bit. I think traffic control went up today on Kimball Avenue between Sethchild and Candlewood. And part of that detour is going to be using Gary Avenue. So the segment that the street crews are going to fix, we need to kind of delay that. Yes, go ahead, Commissioner.
Are they doing anything with the roundabout there at Gary and,
So we addressed Gary and Candlewood 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 3 years ago. So
it's just the road east of the
Yep.
roundabout to the
Yep.
Sethchild's end?
Yep, if you drive, I think there's, I forget the name of the accounting firm and the bank that's on the north side of Gary.
Yeah.
But basically, kind of where the aprons are for the roundabout, back east, the Sethchild, that pavement's is pretty broken up.
Okay.
It's got pretty good structural cracks. But the roundabout, we addressed the roundabout. One thing that the crews did an excellent job on, we changed the curb of the inner diameter. It had the older style curb in it. It was a much more bullnose type curb, and it's a much more laid back curb. That way it allows the trucks and the trailers to ride up on that, and it's not as abrupt. It's a more gentle type transition and stuff in that center. So, let's see here. Village Drive. Village Drive is on the north side of Anderson and kind of J-hooks up to Reeth. There's quite a bit of work that'll need to be done on that street. Again, a local street that the crews can handle. Todd Road will be worked on during the summer break when the students are gone. That's an area north of Claflin and west of Denison. For a number of years, the city crews worked up in that area during the summers when the students were gone, and this is one of the segments that we need to finish up. And then you all may have remembered last year, we did a number of asphalt patches. It used to be 17th Street, but Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, Sunset Avenue, and Ehlers Road. And we'll be doing a similar technique on Venesta on the asphalt portions. Often the asphalt right along the curb line becomes very deteriorated. Again, that's where a lot of the stormwater is. And we'll be using our crews, our milling machine, placing that asphalt. We do have to rent a roller so that we get good compaction because we don't have that piece of equipment, but that's the type of work that'll be done on that asphalt patching of Venesta Drive. Cubic yards of concrete installed by the city crews. It's kind of this next slide. And since you don't have the back screen, I added a couple of slides and I'll just read off these numbers to you. For 2020, we missed our goal a little bit. Our intent was we were trying to hit 2,700 cubic yards. We did hit about 79% of that goal. Obviously, with the COVID and the pandemic restrictions on the crews and how many folks that we would allow to be together definitely during some of our prime production months. We obviously, we just didn't hit those numbers. I will say for 2020, the crews filled 16,836 potholes, and they installed almost 900 tons of asphalt. In 2019, you might remember, which is a much lower number than even what we did in the pandemic, that was the flood. We spent the majority of the time operating pumps, filling sandbags, moving variable message boards, up at all hours of the night, dealing with the flood of 19 of Tuttle Creek. So that really hurt us in 2019. Although I will say, the crews filled 24,500 potholes. They installed almost 1,200 tons of asphalt in 2019. And then in 2018, they had just under 10,000 potholes, 363 tons of asphalt. 2017, they had about 10,000 potholes and 370 tons of asphalt. So hopefully this year, the crews are already off to a good start. Let's see here. Yeah. Actually, that's the next slide. I'm going to skip these because these were ads. This just happened to be potholes filled by crews. I don't want to make anybody break their neck. I can get those slides to you. I had them at the last minute. Installed cubic yards per month by year. That's what this chart is. I really think the next slide is the better one, which is the 7-year average of installed concrete cubic yards per month by the city. Typically, there's 5 months in which we get our greatest production: May, June, July, August, and September. So far this year, we've got 181 cubic yards of concrete already installed. We did lose a little bit of time with the cold snap. Commissioner Morris, you mentioned this winter hasn't been too bad, although that -20 stuff wasn't much fun. And the crews have already filled 3,367 potholes, and that doesn't include March. That's just January and February.
Rob, I know that, Linda Morse, I know that the freezing and thawing over the course of a winter really takes a toll on roads. How about that winter blast that was 21 below for, and hung in there? Was that wasn't the kind of give and take that a regular winter would have? So would it have been as damaging?
Yeah, the majority of the damage is often when you look at some of the KDOT studies, they talk about what they call a hard freeze and thaw cycle. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the values.
Oh, that's okay.
But when they go from a certain coldness to a certain warmness above, bounce between,
Sure.
32 degrees, when they have that range, that's what does the majority of the damage to pavements. And then if you throw in moisture, in fact, I think what's worse is if you get rain above the 32 degrees and then it plummets and then it freezes and expands, it just breaks up that concrete and asphalt as well. And KDOT's got a number of different stories. This winter, we really had a hard freeze that it certainly created potholes, but it didn't oscillate as much as some of our other harder winters. So I don't know, maybe Jeff and Dan have a different opinion because they're out in traffic or directing the crews, filling the potholes, but that's kind of what we experienced this
So
year.
that's kind of good news for,
That's kind of good
Yeah,
news,
okay.
yes. Yeah.
thank you,
The more times you fluctuate
up and down.
in that range above and below the 32, and then you throw in some moisture. The other thing too that we've tried very hard, and I'll credit Jeff and Dan for this, which is the application of calcium chloride. When temperatures are below 15 degrees, normal rock salt that we spread out is not very effective. It has a very slow chemical reaction time in melting snow and ice. So we use calcium chloride. Calcium chloride also has deterioration to asphalt and concrete. That's when you kind of see joint deterioration. Brian Johnson, a few years ago, changed our concrete mix design to address that. And we're seeing better results with our joints on the concrete. Unfortunately, there's a lot of concrete out there that doesn't have that new mix design and that research that Brian did. Planned contractor work for this summer. So a number of things are already bid, and in fact, they may be underway already. They were supposed to get started on Kimball between K113 and Candlewood. You all awarded that recently. Wyndham Heights subdivision, asphalt mill and overlay is coming up, as well as the Marlat Avenue and the Ward District streets. I am looking to try and add a few more street segments than what's listed up there, or what was listed in your packet. Again, it's, I gotta be careful how much I bid out, with the dollars that I do have. But we are trying to address as much as we possibly can when we're in an area. There's some other streets up there that are listed, which are in the north view, which is Charles Lane, Galloway Drive, and Purcell Mills. It's the street segments that are north of Butterfield. So just so everybody knows, it's not the streets on the south side, because those are private. Randy has a water line project. BG is under contract to design that. And as we address the water line in those three streets up in Northview, we're also going to address the street condition index. Again, this kind of goes back to us trying to make a complete and whole project, not only above ground but below ground, and try and coordinate so that we don't come in with one project, tear up a little bit. We're just trying to make it as complete as possible. We're trying to have more conversations internally to make sure that we're not missing opportunities, whether it's utility improvements or pavement improvements.
Rob, quick question again, how to solve here. Is that the only stretch of Marlat that's in the city limits from Browning up to Seth Childs?
No, actually,
You don't have to get too carried away with it, but.
no. So Browning to Marlat is in the city limits, and then from Tuttle Creek Boulevard all the way to Casement is in the city limits, and the gap is Browning to Tuttle Creek Boulevard.
Okay.
That's still in the county.
Okay.
So we're addressing Browning west to Seth Child.
Up to south side of Tatarack.
And if you, yes, and if you go up there and drive it, you'll notice that the shoulder portion is really deteriorating. And again, we'll have to do a mill and overlay, because that segment, if I just put more asphalt on top of it, it just screws up everybody's driveways up there, makes the ditches deeper. There's no curb and gutter up there, so it'll be a mill and overlay. So.
Okay.
And the pavement markings, we can't keep paint on it because there's so many alligator cracks. It's just, there's a whole slew of reasons why I want to address that Marlat. And frankly, with all the construction on Kimball Avenue this year, Marlat is the de facto detour. So we need to make sure we address that and the road's safe and suitable. So, answer your question, Commissioner. Okay, thank you.
It's my go-to to get across town.
Absolutely. Which is one reason why we advocated to do and cooperate with the county on the Marlat and Denison project. Denison and Marlat's gonna be part of those detour routes, whether they're officially signed or not. The locals know to go and use those north-south and east-west type roads to avoid Kimball Avenue this year. And it will be intense. If you thought 2020 was a lot, hold on to your hat. Okay, contractor work. Okay, all right. This happens to be with the sales tax. So the last slide was on the gas tax, on what projects we were funding. The gas tax. The sales tax. The slide that I have up. Reith Avenue's already under construction. A couple of you have already commented on it. Cherry Hill and Kings Road area already bid, already awarded. Plymouth and Little Kitten, south of Kimball Avenue. There's a stormwater project that's being designed in-house by staff to address a number of drainage nuisance problems that have been plaguing that area. And they also contribute to the pavement deterioration as well. Hopefully we'll be bid here late summer. And then we'll also have dollars of the sales tax to address the pavement condition. College Heights is another one of those projects that's being designed by BG in that water line package. I just happened, I have to pull some dollars out of the sales tax side to make sure that I don't overrun the gas tax. Future projects. Well, there's a long list, and you notice I put 2021 up there /2022. It always comes down to, I try and bid out the big projects first, put the big rocks in the glass, and then put the small pebbles in around it. And my intent, if I have revenues that come in that are sufficient, and there's capacity with contractors, whether it's concrete or asphalt, I'll try and pick up what I can in other streets. Some of those streets that are already programmed happen to be Fremont Street. That is definitely a 2022. That is in coordination with an ATA project. I think when I provided the Aggieville update, I had 3 different circles. So I had 14th, South Manhattan, and 12th Street. There's intersection improvements at each of them. One of them has a bus shelter on the south side, some improvements along the park side, some pedestrian improvements at all 3 intersections. Well, the pavement in between those intersections, Jeff and the guys did some cores, and it's a hodgepodge. Some of it's 2 inches of asphalt and 4 inches of concrete, and it's just it's a mess. And we need to make it uniform. It's got some deterioration. And again, that's the intent with that Fremont. And I'm apologizing, you can't all see that. But I think it's on your slide, on your handout, I mean. And our intent's to kind of address that pavement, and those dollars will have to be programmed out of one of the funds. Anderson Avenue, Sunset to Connecticut, that's another waterline project that's being designed right now in-house. That is definitely going to be 2022. I am not going to tear up Anderson Avenue between Sunset and Connecticut this year. I don't think the community could tolerate that. Between having Kimball tore up and KDOT playing with bridges on Wildcat Creek, I just don't see that tolerance from the motorists. So we'll continue to work on that design, but that is a very pricey, and I've asked my engineers to come up with some alternatives other than just replace it all, and they've been doing some research on that for me.
What is the phase 2 of Stag Hill?
Phase 2, basically just another package.
Okay,
Or
or another piece.
Yeah, Commissioner, that's a good question. We did an initial package up there.
Yeah.
In fact, we had some complaints, hey, when are you gonna come back? Just last week and this week.
Okay.
From some residents. We may chase a contractor up there for a couple of weeks and do a change order out of the Wreath project. We're kind of waiting to see what the availability of that contractor is. I do have some dollars programmed out of the sales tax this year, but again, I want to put those big stones first and then bring in the little pebbles. But we do need to get back up into that Stag Hill area.
Is it on the far end? Is that what this
Yeah, it's,
package, phase 2 package is? Or closer to Allison?
Allison Allison was the complaint this week.
Okay, all right. It'll be
And
the north end of it.
I can't remember if it's DeHoff or Dundee. It's an intermix of asphalt and concrete up there, without having,
So those are the side streets up there, not specifically on Stag Hill?
no, and I'm sorry.
That's all I needed, thank you.
And I probably have a bad habit of just saying area, sometimes. Let's see here, what else on this list do I want to point out? Okay, I think that's about it. Again, got quite a few asphalt areas listed in subdivisions. Probably the other one that has me concerned with the completion and opening of the new gymnasium up there, as well as the work that USD 383 has done, as well as our Kirkwood project, Walters Drive, basically from US 24 to Northfield. You all go drive that and you tell me what you think of that. But it's going to have to be addressed. It really wasn't identified previously. But you all go drive and I think you can be quick judges of how well it's not performing. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this happens to be gas tax. And this is on the revenue side. This has been broken down. I go back as far as 2005. When I go to write the report at the end of this year, I'll start with 2017 and go through 2020. We try and spend roughly 1.1 million each year out of this fund for street maintenance. Remember, this fund also pays for a lot of our grant matches. So you see, some of these revenues are greater than 1.1. Well, there's dollars that come out of there that help pay a couple of salaries for a few employees in the traffic department. It also helps pay for salt, de-icer, concrete, asphalt, and other road materials that the street crews use. It also helps pay, like I mentioned, those grants. Some of those grants are either temp noted for 4 years, or some of them are 10-year bonds. So just like mortgage payments for your house, we got to keep making those mortgage payments on those projects that we've awarded and completed in the past. This happens to be the sales tax. So I don't know if Commissioner Hannesall, if this gets to your question about revenues. When we originally did the sales tax question back in 2016, we estimated roughly $2 million per year in annual revenues, knowing that roughly 5% of that had to go towards the safe routes to school. So you can kind of see some years we've been, and obviously 2017, we didn't start with a full year, but you can kind of see where we're at in terms of revenues collected and so forth are the sales tax. So I would say that we are ahead of schedule. The one thing that I told the community and I've told the commissioners, and I'll continue to manage this way, is that we don't bid out more dollars than we receive. Our intent is not to temporary note. Our intent is not to bond projects. It's to pay cash as we go. If revenues are up, then we'll try and bid out more projects. If revenues are down, then we just scale back how much we bid out and kind of control the cash flow that way. So I don't know, Commissioner Hannesall, if you had any more questions on that. Okay.
Rob, this is Commissioner
Sure.
Woody. I have a couple of questions. So it looks like, we're kind of on par where we should be, but at the same time, the gas tax revenue has decreased because of COVID and travel and such. Do you see any funds coming our way from the American Rescue Plan or the infrastructure bill they're talking about? I know this is sales tax, but gas tax is part of also our revenue source, so I don't know which pot that would fall into.
So I want to try and remember the number I gave Ron, because I calculated, was it 7% or 3% I told you we were down on the gas tax? We were less than 10% down on the gas tax. I know that for a fact. Okay. I just can't remember, because Ron had asked me this question about a month ago, and I had calculated it out, looking at like the last 3 years, what was our average revenue for gas tax. So yes, you're correct, we're down. It's not greater than 10%, I know that.
Commissioner, I'll jump in on
Yep,
that.
thank you.
So yesterday I looked at a webinar, and today there was one with the National League of Cities. So it looks like that we would be eligible for that revenue makeup. So it looks like we're going to be able to use 2019 as the base year compared to 2020. And so those revenue shortfalls in those funds from 19 to 20, which will be considerable, especially TGT and other places, those will be eligible for the Recovery Act. Still a lot more information coming in that regard as to exact details, but at least as it appears right now, it looks like we would be able to give Rob some more money to bid some more street work.
So I was watching the other webinar from the league, I think on Wednesday last week or something. If you could put those slides in our mail folder, that would be great. I don't know if it was the same webinar or not, but she had some wonderful slides.
Sure.
And I took a lot of notes. But I'm not sure, like, when they say gas tax, does that go to KDOT and then KDOT splits it among our communities, or does it come directly to our community?
So it does come through the state, but it is considered our revenue. So the rules will be based on our 2019 budget. And if there were less funds received during 2020, during the pandemic, then we would be able to use recovery funds to make up for that.
Okay, sounds good, thank you.
All right, I'll keep going. Let's see here. I talked about sales tax revenues. Now, here's the expenditure side. And I think I gave everyone kind of a heads up about this previously. So in 2020, we didn't spend a lot of our gas tax, and there was a reason for that. To include myself, I was very concerned about sales tax. We heard projections of 20 to 30% drop. Well, our sales tax cannot be used for salaries of employees. The gas tax can. We didn't lose this money just because we didn't spend it in 2020. It carries over, it rolls over, stays in the fund. But we held back. We didn't bid out Kimball Avenue. That was a $1.3 million bid. We just did that here recently. So while 2020 doesn't look very good, there was a reason for it. It was because we were being very cautious, because we needed folks that can fix potholes and deal with flooding and plow streets, and we had to make sure we had cash to pay their salaries. So while none of those initial projections came true to the severity that everyone originally predicted, and that's okay, because I was in that camp, because I was very worried too. So we were very conservative, we held back on how much we bid. The good news is it's not like we lost the money. It's not like we have to hurry up and spend it in the next 30 days. That money is still in the account. Okay. And then this is the sales tax expenditures. Again, we backed off a little bit on 2020, but again, it comes down to we can't use that for salaries or anything like that. It has to be used on repairing streets, and we were very close, as you can see, to that 2 million mark. Our goal obviously is always about 1.9. Again, I do have carryover from year to year, and the whole goal is, again, I don't want to outspend or outbid what revenues I've received. I want to make sure I can pay my bills and pay my contractors. Okay. Safe routes to school. We have this map, kind of all these different dots up here, kind of shows you the different phases that we've gone through. Phase 2C is well into design, and hopefully will be bid here in June or July, and then start some construction this fall. We're working through a number of easements, especially up there in the Northview area. There's some challenges on some of those streets and the way some of those subdivisions were platted, but that's why we've got Benish helping us and some great staff working very hard on those easements, and hopefully we can secure those. So a lot of the projects that are in the pink haven't been completed, but dollars have been obligated, and we have basically 13 projects that are either completed or in progress, I already kind of mentioned the 2A and 2B are already done, and the 2C we're hoping to start construction here this year. I mentioned about the 5% in terms of trying to expend on safe routes to school. With all three phases, the initial safe routes to school study, the phase 2 study, and then each of the constructions, the 2A, the 2B, and then what we've estimated for 2C, we're sitting at right around 700, just over 750,000. Remember, the end of this year will be the end of 5 years. If I were to have spent just 100,000 per year, I should be at $500,000. I'm slightly above that. And again, all that means is I have to watch what the revenues are, and we may have to scale back which projects we do at the end of the program. But I wanted you all to know this was certainly a component of the sales tax ballot question that was important to our community. And I just wanted to show that we are trying to keep up, and we're not like waiting to the last minute to try and make these improvements in the community to make the routes this commissioner.
Commissioner Hattasell here. So can you explain a little bit on Phase 2C, what the Hanley, Galloway, and Charley sidewalk modifications might be? Are you making them wider? Are you rebuilding them?
On Galloway and Charleis, I know there's some segments, when I looked at those plans, they're not even existing there. Some of them, you know, frankly, some of the sidewalks don't meet any of the ADA compliance in terms of cross slope. The ADA ramps aren't compliant. So those are some of the challenges that I know up there. I know Galloway and Charleis also were dealing with the easements, because there are private streets on the south side,
Okay.
and the way those streets were dedicated and so forth. Again, a part of that overall study that happened citywide, those were needs, and these projects ranked very high, so that's kind of why they're in there, Commissioner. If you need more details, I can certainly get the plans for you, but
I'll watch until they get constructed, and then I'll know.
They're close to the school, and all these new neighborhoods have to pass through them. And so that ease of getting the students to them, rather than having to drive them all around in order to avoid cutting through yards.
again, anytime, you know, my son is a little bit older now, but when he was younger, anytime I could convince him to stay on the sidewalk, as a parent, I felt much better about that. That's where I taught him to learn to ride his bike and so on and so forth. And that's where he and I still walk today, in neighborhoods where I live. And if you can get that type of user, and that family out of the roadway and onto a sidewalk, that's great. Experienced bicyclists, and that, you know, that's a whole different category. You know, they feel more comfortable riding on the road and so forth. But this program's, again, we're trying to address that safety of that child and kind of remove them from the roadway.
Hopefully, we would not allow that subdivision design ever
Yep.
again, because it is so inadequate in several ways.
And you're correct, Commissioner Morris. You know, I think Eric, with Community Development, and Chad Bunger will be coming forth in the next series of work sessions. It's not the UDO, I forget the new name, but anyways, they'll be coming forth with the development code, the Manhattan Development Code, and you know, sidewalks and those criteria for subdivisions will all be discussed and debated.
So Rob, this is Commissioner Reddy. I understand Phase 3, that's where you were saying they're still in the process of getting it finished. About schools such as Anthony, Eisenhower, some of the ones that don't have the blue, yellow, or the pinkish dots on them, does that mean they're already adequate? Or does that mean that's a different phase?
I can go back and look. I can't remember if middle schools are eligible. I know high schools are not. I can't remember if middle schools are eligible or not for safe routes to school grant dollars from KDOT. Again, it has a little bit to do with the age of the student and so forth. I can go back and look at kind of the prioritization. We certainly have, and I'll make no bones about it, we certainly have tried to prioritize some of the elementary.
And I was just looking at like Bluemont, Wilson, Woodrow Wilson and such, so I'm thinking they're already good enough, or maybe they're in a different phase.
Well, remember too, in Bluemont is the Ward District, and the Ward District has sidewalks on both sides of the roadway.
Okay.
So there's already a lot of
Yeah.
existing facilities, whereas the evolution of some of our subdivisions around these other schools, there's a time when sidewalks weren't even required for subdivisions, so nothing got built. So when they did the big initial study, I forget, you can't see this, but you know, part of that phase 1, phase 2, when they took the projects and they gave weighted scores for various different categories, you know, they tried to take out, you know, any subjective type stuff and try and keep it more quantitative. And if, you know, projects that had nothing often would score greater than projects that had at least something in terms of an existing infrastructure. So I can go back and look at, I've forgotten the list. I have too many lists and
No,
have
that's
to
not a
pull 'em.
problem. But it looks like we're on track as far as the safe routes to school. Do you envision there being revenue funds, funds that are still going to be unused? Or all of them will be used within that time frame? And if we don't need them because everything was able to be completed within the next 3 or 4 years, I say, what happens to those funds? Do they stay in the Safe Routes to School for future, or do they get combined with the rest of the?
So in terms of the sales tax, well, let me back up, maybe Commissioner, if I can answer this a better way. I would say there's probably a greater need than we have revenue available from the sales tax. I'd have to go back, relook at cost estimates. There's always requests, there's always modifications that folks are looking for help, whether it be like we did on Griffith Drive, where we modified the crossings and create chokers, because traffic volumes have increased on Griffith. Maybe there's already an existing crosswalk, but there's a new method of traffic calming that we can try out. So I would say there's probably a greater need than what we have for revenue.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Thank you.
Rob, this is Ron Fear, City Manager, you might just talk a little bit about, so we also have the Safe Routes to School program through KDOT.
Yep.
And so a lot of our funds from the 210 sales tax have gone to leverage those funds, because I don't think you've got those included in that total.
No.
Keep in mind that you just approved, the grant application that we just received is to update the Safe Routes to School master plan. So that's gonna come out with a whole new list of recommended projects in the areas for those KDOT funds, which can also be used for these funds.
And that's what we've tried to do. We've tried to use that sales tax as our matching grant, leverage as much dollars as possible, as Ron stated, from the state, and do as much as we can with the dollars we do have.
I think I keep forgetting some of these other things you've discussed. It seems like a while ago until we start connecting and weaving those pieces back together again. I remember when Stephanie Peterson was presenting all of that, and how it happened a few years ago with Ogden and all of these schools. So I'm glad that we're doing all of this for our schools and the bikes, and I'm glad we're able to leverage some of the dollars and combine a few grants together as well. So.
And there's certainly been the quality of life bond question that passed with the trails as well. I mean, there's been the Kimball project that's starting now between Seth Child and Candlewood. That's going to go to a 10-foot wide sidewalk. There's just tons of users of that segment. The previous Kimball from Hudson to Venesta, we widened that sidewalk. Lots of users. Again, make it more comfortable for both bicyclists and pedestrians and those types of users. Yes, Commissioner.
Going back to the KDOT grant thing, are most of those 80/20s, 90/10s, 50/50s? What's our contribution usually?
80/20 is typically for Safe Routes to School. I'd have to go back and look and see if they've upped that. They have been paying for more things. KDOT's been more lenient in the past on a lot of their different grant funds, where they've been paying for design. They never used to pay for design, so that certainly has helped us out. Used to be 100% on the sponsor or the local entity, so that's helped. But 80/20 is kind of the general rule of thumb. It's bounced around a little bit over the years.
That's a lot of leverage in then, so.
That's
Our part's the 20, right?
That's
Yeah,
correct.
okay, so yes.
Yep. Again, that's, and we keep trying to leverage and be competitive against, that other city, that KU city, I like to beat them, so, and trying to bring the dollars back. I never say that it's free money, because it's not. It's all our tax dollars that came out of all our wallets, but if I can bring more back to our community, then so be it. That's just the way the rules are, so that's the game I'm gonna play. Challenges ahead. I mentioned earlier in some of my wonderful charts, when you get hard time sleeping, challenges for the remaining years at major collectors, Martin Luther King Drive, Sunset 11th. Apparently I was really worried about Sunset because I put it up there twice. I guess that's both north and south of Points Avenue. But those segments, just doing a mill and overlay, I'm not sure is going to last the length that I want it to. I really feel like we need to do full depth. The challenge is the cost to go full depth with base repairs is much higher, and that's a challenge. Randy does have a water line project on Sunset that's kind of been identified in some recent analysis with Olson Associates on his master plan from Points Avenue north. No, I'm not saying that right. It's Anderson Avenue north up to Platt Street, where we need to add a water line to improve some fire flow for that, for those neighborhoods. So we're gonna try and coordinate that as well. So maybe that's why I broke up Sunset twice, but it's those types of challenges for the program. Alleys, is, I guess probably just a sore subject that raises my blood pressure. The crews will go out, blade the alleys, and I swear it can rain like it is right now, and in 2 days, they're just beat down and they're pothole filled, and the phone rings and the emails pop up. So alleys will always be a challenge. But again, I continue to advocate that we've got to continue to address our local streets. Why I'm proud of how well we've done on our major streets. Keeping local streets improved in front of people's homes, I think, is important. I heard that during the sales tax question when I was doing the education. That affects property values. I heard that from the real estate folks and the realtors, and just overall pride of the neighborhoods to make sure they have good streets in front of their homes.
What alley are we gonna fix this year?
This year is the 1200, you guys did the public hearing, 1200 block. I want to say it's between Raton and Bertrand, and I might be wrong.
Oh, right, north, okay.
Yep, so that's the one alley. We're working on easements. We finally got a gentleman to call us back, and hopefully we'll be able to wrap up those easements here quickly, and then get that out to bid.
That would be, part of that would be a benefit district too, right?
It is a benefit district. It's 100, the only thing that's in that benefit district that is city at large is the storm sewer. We've been adding storm sewer to some of these alleys that have never had it before, but the pavement costs have been 100% the adjacent property owners.
And does there have to be 51% of them sign off, or 80%, or 90? And not everybody's thrilled about those, but yeah.
Yeah, when we do the public hearing method, it's really a determination by the 5 of you. A majority of you have to vote in favor. And the reason why we've kind of gone to the public hearing process on alleys is that we just can't seem to get consensus to get the 51%.
Okay.
Yep. Commissioner Reddy?
Yeah, Rob, Commissioner Reddy, for the alleys, the paved and unpaved, they don't come from the sales tax, they come from gas tax, is that how we, or the general fund?
No, technically, we can use either funding source.
Oh, is that right? Okay, I didn't realize, I thought alleys were off limits for the,
They are public rights of way, and they're eligible for either funding source.
okay, good, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of them, so.
Yes. I guess before I jump to questions, I will just kind of remind everyone of what's to come this summer, that I'm sure everyone will be thrilled and buy stock and orange cones. A reminder that North Campus Corridor, we'll be wrapping up the Kimball and College intersection improvements here, hopefully if weather will cooperate, the next 30 or so days. We currently have in the Aggieville district, we have Laramie Street from 14th Street to North Manhattan under construction. We'll have 14th Street from Laramie to Anderson under construction, as well as intersection improvements at 14th and Anderson as well. We'll be finishing up the Downtown East Watershed Project, #1. They're currently up near around Points Avenue and 9th Street. There's still some work on the north side of Points Avenue, and that contractor will be getting started soon again to finish up that stormwater project that tied all the way back to the levee. We have the Westwood Storm Sewer Project that's ongoing right now, and we could be 2 to 3 weeks weather dependent on getting that open and completed. We have the Rosencutter reinforced concrete box that's being installed. We're ripping out the old wooden box that's on Rosencutter and replacing that. Reith Avenue, I mentioned earlier, moving along nicely. Again, if the weather would continue to cooperate, that could be finished up in a few weeks. Cherry Hill and Kings Road area. Again, those two don't connect, but those two areas, those have been awarded, and they will start this spring, summer. The Kirkwood Road, they poured the bridge probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, and that project should be wrapping up soon with the Kirkwood extension between Walters and Marlatt. Of course, we have the Stonehaven subdivision. Amherst and Miller Parkway roundabout is completed and open. And then that construction, that subdivision continues. We have the K-State Research Subdivision, west side of North Manhattan, north of Baker Way, that's under construction. Things yet to bid, but are coming in 2021. North Campus Corridor, Kimball Avenue from College to the Rowing Training Center. There's a bunch of work that'll be included on Kimball Avenue, as well as kind of a reverse frontage road that'll connect at College and then eliminate some of the driveways on the north side of Kimball. That's kind of part of the deal in which K-State, we're asking them to give up driveways, give up access points, consolidate access points, but we're providing kind of a reverse frontage road where they can still access their various buildings and classrooms and labs and so forth. That'll be coming to the commission for award here hopefully in a couple of months. Then we have the other major project, which is a complete closure of Kimball Avenue from North Manhattan to the Manhattan Fire Department headquarters driveway. That's the curves that everyone talks about. Despite what certain folks have said, we are not straightening those out. We are increasing the radius and making them more gentle. There will still be curves in the road, but the lanes will be wider. There will be a center median, and hopefully we will reduce the head-on crashes that have occurred on Kimball Avenue. And then there's also trails and sidewalks that goes on in both segments of the North Campus projects. Again, all those be coming before you for consideration. When Jason and I did the update on the Aggieville District, North Manhattan from Bluemont to Laramie, we talked about the bike lanes, the parking stalls. Jason kind of went through that presentation. That'll start late 2021. I don't believe we've brought forth the design contract yet with Olson for final design, but that'll be coming soon because we got to get them going, got to get the plans produced, and get that out to bid yet this year. The levee improvement project, well, you know, massive project. We're working very hard on easements. I think we're down to 3 or 4 easements. We do have a couple of folks in condemnation cases, but all those easements that we needed to acquire, SMH has done an excellent job for us. Jeff Hancock and his team and Ben Burton done an excellent job for us in negotiation and acquiring those easements, and we're working towards that bid here in June and July. I mentioned the Fremont ATA improvements. We also have the grant for the 600 block of points. In fact, Thursday we have an internal meeting to talk about to make sure we have enough matching dollars. That's a part of the ATA grant that Ann Smith got in the 600 block of Points Avenue. And we will hopefully be bidding that late this year and doing that improvement. We have the 1200 block alley improvements in the UCR district. I mentioned the asphalt mill and overlay already for Wyndham Heights, Marlatt, and the Ward district. We have Highland at the Grand Mere Unit 2 subdivision construction coming. We have the North Manhattan pedestrian and bike lane improvements that we're also working on. Juliet and Points Avenue, that's also part of our discussion on Thursday to make sure that we have dollars to make improvements to Juliet and Points, both pedestrian as well as the old traffic signals that I hope will continue to stay up in these high winds. I mentioned already the Plymouth and Little Kitten storm sewer. We have the Hayes Trail project that's under design, which is on Hayes Drive, goes from McCall Road all the way to the Casement Road on the west side. So that design is under full swing. Again, that's another project we hope to bid and get under construction in time and anticipation before the levee project starts. And I know Commissioner Morris, that's been part of the Northview Rising's concern is connectivity with with Linear Trail being closed, that there's another means and methods for that part of the community to connect down to McCall Road. So that's another project that's moving on. And I got more, but I'm gonna stop. My point is 60 million in construction in 2021. Last year was 30 million. It's going to be intense. So with that, commissioners, mayor, questions?
Yeah, excellent briefing. It looks like we're getting a good return on our investment. I think it appears to be well managed. I just want to recommend two things for anyone out there watching. Going to be a lot of orange cones out there, and everybody always acts surprised. Well, the city website, you can sign up to get a thing called In the Zone, which is a construction update. And by using that, you'll know exactly where the cones are going to show up and when they're going to show up. And I find that to be just an excellent item. And then the other thing is the Reported app that the city's been using. If if there's a pothole that Rob missed, here's your opportunity to, type it in with a location and somebody will get to it and shovel some asphalt in it, because that's what this money is for. And so I recommend everybody, put those two things on their phone. And while you're there, you can also sign up for the Insider, which is a great newsletter on the city, and the Man Happiness thing, which tells you all the events that are going on. So we've got some great products there that I don't think everybody is using, and it's real easy to keep yourself informed by using those.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, for the plug for the Reported app. I think Commissioner Reddy, you had asked a question a couple of work sessions back. The Reported app is how these two gentlemen get a lot of the reports in terms of going to repair this pothole or that pothole. You mentioned the city website. We hope in April to have everything. Right now we have some outdated projects. Again, I've expressed some frustration during the pandemic of losing Vivian to the Riley County for the pandemic. She was always a big, huge help in keeping us updated. Our goal is by April, first week in April, to have this webpage site updated, old projects removed, new projects installed. We try and keep what is active, upcoming, and so forth. But that's the intent, is to get this page updated, and it's a little bit outdated right now, and it needs some work. Again, it's workload, and Vivian does an outstanding job for the entire city, and unfortunately the pandemic has stolen her and taken some of her capacity. I think Commissioner Hassel, you had another question?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I saw that Buckner was on your list of streets. That can't be 7 or 8 years old by now, can it?
I can go back and look.
It just seems like those are a bunch of duplexes on a semicircle or something. It seems like that road didn't last very long. And I remember when I was going door to door up off of Amherst, off of Firethorn, and some of those new streets up there, on some of the cul-de-sacs, there's like chunks of concrete had already gotten kind of bumped up along some of those places. Like, these houses are 2 years old at the most in those areas, and I can't remember which streets they were, but I was surprised that some of the new streets just don't seem to have the resilience you might kind of expect. And I don't know if it's a matter of, because they're neighborhood streets, the specs are low enough that they're just more likely to have some issues, or any insight as did it haven't 5 or 7 years ago they didn't change the specs and make them less. I suppose you're always increasing them as opposed to making them lighter, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been criticized by developers because streets cost more, because when I showed up here in 2005, you all didn't require base rock underneath roads. And we increased a 4-inch base rock underneath our local streets. And that was never part of the specifications. A lot of cities are at 6 inches. And we've experimented. We've worked with Buyer Construction. They're the largest limestone coarse aggregate producer. Again, trying to pick materials, the specifications that we can get locally, so that they're effective, meet KDOT specs, but can be, I don't want to haul granite from Idaho or North Dakota. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Kansas City's doing that. They're hauling in granite from other states on trains, and I'm not interested in doing it. As long as KDOT is going to continue to certify quarries, and they have a lot smarter folks than me on the material side. As long as they're going to continue to certify, we're trying to use that stuff. But Yeah, to your question, I'll look into the Buckner, maybe,
It just doesn't seem that old.
Yeah.
So, the second thing is, the Plymouth and Little Kitten storm sewer thing, I remember also when I was in that neighborhood, seemed like there's from where Little Kitten goes, east, east from Plymouth, I think there's a spring or something on the south side of the street there that was just constantly generating. Is that, any ideas if that's something that's part of the storm sewer issue, or is that?
I'll verify with my staff, but that's certainly, I know of those springs. When I was city engineer, I laid out some initial cost estimates years ago, 10 years ago, and the stormwater fund wasn't what it is today. And I know that was certainly some of the deterioration of the pavement, and it's certainly some of the nuisance and the algae and
That creates
complaints.
a hazard, because I know over off of St. Christopher, St. Matthew, somewhere over there, years ago, a gal slipped on the algae and bumped her
Yep.
head on the curb, and it was just a terrible situation, because
Yep.
there's just a constant, and I don't know what if that was a Springs thing too, but I know up there off of.
Yep, Little Kitten Springs, and I know also I've dealt with some springs on the north side of Little Kitten, up on Stephen Court. These hills here, I've worked with those neighbors, again, that's probably about 10 years ago. So yeah, there's a number of different springs throughout the community that wreak havoc, both on the pavement condition, because it saturates that base and that freeze-thaw cycle, and if it's saturated, it just expands and contracts in the pavement, and the base rock doesn't like that stuff. But I'll check into Buckner. Hopefully I didn't write something down I shouldn't have, so. Yeah, and just, I don't know if you can see it. It's right behind you, Commissioner. I apologize. It's a huge spreadsheet. So just, there's 3,391 segments of roadway in the city of Manhattan.
One block each?
No, it's kind of a node and link type analysis. So we go from intersection to intersection, or if there's a change in how many lanes. So if you go from, say, 2 lanes to 4 lanes, then we create another node, and then we create a new segment. So it's not necessarily every 100 feet, but it's from node to node. But that's how much we're trying to manage, and that's how I created a lot of my slides, and just all the different data and looking at.
Is that available to the public? I know you told me that when people call, I live at 1200 Virginia or something, and you can tell them,
Yep.
your pavement is blank. Is there a way for people to just go to that site themselves and look at it without bothering you?
We don't have that up and posted and stuff. I would like to probably, so in 2018, we went out and we used that third party to collect. I would like to, before we go to the ballot question, hopefully in 2024, whoever the commissioners are at that time will agree that we bring that forth. I'd like to redo and recollect all that data. Perhaps then we can go ahead and post it, because it is it doesn't deteriorate, doesn't automatically deteriorate each segment each year. So it's a little bit of a static snapshot. The only thing that gets updated is when we do fix a segment, we do change that PCI value. So I don't know. I guess some of this is my working copy too. So, and it can change literally week to week.
Kind of, in that regard, you mentioned that that Walter Drive wasn't on the list, but now it seems to be on your mind, and you're encouraging us to look at it. That's a 2 or 3 years, so that's not evaluated on this list, or where does it fall in?
I would say that, so if you were to probably go look at the pavement condition index map right now, some of the segments are below 70. What I will tell you is all the construction activity that's going on up there, it's made some of those segments that are already below 70 even worse, and those that were maybe above 70 may now be below 70, if you know what I mean, just because of all the activity and construction up there. The challenge that I will have, Commissioner, is how do I fit that in just with everything else going on? Can I find dollars? Can I find savings? Where does it rank? with other streets and segments. Can I delay something else to go address that segment? Again, I think you know it's going to be a highly used roadway, especially with a new gymnasium and additional
Expansion of the
students.
middle school.
Yeah, change in the middle school. So,
On that note, I was just gonna say, I was looking up as you were, going through some of the safe routes to school, because Commissioner Reddy had mentioned, the middle school there, and I think the first time I heard you speak was probably 2014, trying to tell the school board about the safe routes, or 2013, 2014 about the safe routes to school, and, you've done a lot, and I know every time that I've heard that, I've tried to ask you to do another thing with the safe routes. How can we use that? And it's not an endless supply, but also those middle school. I don't think any of the secondary schools are in there. So it's in the reports. It's always the 8 middle schools within the city, and then Ogden got looped into the MPO because they qualify as an under 20,000 population. So it can go directly to KDOT. So that's that collaboration with the MPO, with 383, with us as a city, and you telling the community the importance of that. I just wanted to, it's a good reminder of how far that has come and how that can be possible. You're still working on it. The other collaboration there that you point out, and I'm glad you do, is the ATA projects. And what's the one on you mentioned? It's not on here, but you were going through a list of things. It's 6th and points, I think.
600 block of points.
600 block of points.
600 block of points. It's basically,
That was a grant that Ann had worked on.
Yep, Ann applied for. I believe there's a bus stop both on the north and the south side of Points, with a little bit of, I can't remember if there's a bus pull-off area or not, but, and gave up a few parking spaces, but I know there's a bus shelter on both the north and the south side. The other thing that we're gonna do with that project, we're gonna address, as you're traveling east on Points, we've always had complaints about speeds into the downtown district. So there's some traffic calming techniques that we're gonna look at to try and address some of those speeds. The chambers, we tried some signs in the middle of the road, speed limit signs, 20 mile an hour. I think they lasted maybe 26 hours before they were mowed down by motorists in the turning radiuses. So we're gonna try and, again, comprehensive, not only ATA component for the bus shelters, but also some traffic calming for that downtown district. And I can certainly grab the plans if you're really interested, and we've been working with Gina on that as well, so.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Commissioners? Mayor?
Okay, I think we got an excellent briefing. Things seem to be looking up as far as spending the funds and getting all these various road projects fixed. So I don't think we have anything else, so we'll just adjourn for tonight. Thank you.